So we all make bad decisions, but my next guest believes that's actually a good thing. She's sharing ways to stop doubting your decisions and start making more confident choices. Corporate recruiter Carly Hazen is joining me, and we're already laughing. Like, I can't stop smiling because I realize I'm maybe the odd one out here. I think you might be with me on this. I'm recklessly decisive.
Oh, yeah.
I am overly decisive to the point that I think sometimes it's almost a weakness as much as it is a strength.
Oh yeah, we tee it up, treat it like a sport, right?
Totally.
Just tee it up and hit it out and feel really good about ourselves after.
Yes, part of that's the industry I work in. TV's so fast-paced and same, right?
Yeah. Oh, I work with executives, and I always tell myself, executive decision makers would rather have a project 80% accurate and in on time than 100% accurate and 5 minutes late, right? So you gather as much facts as possible, you present it, and you have to move on, and you cannot sit and dwell, right? I always talk to my daughter, her junior jazz coach, when they're playing a game, someone will make a shot, it won't go in, he always yells, next play. Like, immediately start focusing on what comes next. You cannot sit and dwell, because the dwelling, I think, is what causes anxiety about future decision making. And indecision causes that anxiety. The anxiety causes indecision, and it just you just continue to dwell. You've got to be able to move on and be resilient.
At the root of it, Carly, what do you think holds women back from making decisions or being that confident decision maker that we'd like to be in our head?
That's such a good question. I think that really what it comes down to is that good decisions come from experience, but experience comes from bad decisions. So you're never going to get, making good decisions is a skill. It is a practice. It is an art. It is something that you can learn to do better. It's just, will you allow yourself to make enough mistakes along the way to get better at anything? And will you allow those mistakes to help you grow instead of making them cripple you for future decision making?
That's powerful. I think it's also really freeing. Like, I'm going to get better at decisions as I mess it up.
Mess it up. And have you ever noticed that people that always feel like they have nothing to lose are like fearless, and they always do really, really great? You watch the Olympics. People that were like, hey, I'm like one of only 2 people from my country, I have nothing to lose, I'm just going to go out and give it my all, end up winning a medal because they just have this fearless performance. And I think that's what we love so much about watching kids, is that they're not in their own head yet, right? They're not trying to be perfect. It's the first time where they try anything, and there's something so incredibly empowering about that. And I see it a lot in the corporate recruiting area. You know, people will want to try for a new job, and we'll have these intimate discussions about how they really want to go for a new job, but they don't want anyone to know that they're interviewing for a new job, because if they don't get it, they're afraid about what that looks like to their colleagues. They won't even tell their own family members. And then what's wrong about that is you go all the way through privately, and then you get an offer, and then all of a sudden you have to have support in making that decision. Do I take this job or not? And they've got this support network that's like, I didn't even know you were unhappy in your current position.
Haven't walked that path with you.
Or I see it in interviewing. You know, people will just rack themselves about, did I say the right thing in an interview setting? And all that second guessing. So it's very common. Everyone can relate to this, but it is a skill. You've got to practice making good decisions.
When you are pooling, when you are struggling, grappling to make that decision and be confident in your choices, you say the first self-check needs to circle back to your personal values.
Yes, I think that what we struggle with is, you know, like with anything, we're more confident if we have a roadmap. What we struggle with when making good decisions is we don't necessarily know what our framework is. So if we get together a framework and then fairly judge between those hard choices, I always say line them up and then ask yourself, which decision represents what I care about most? You can call that your core values, or what you're most passionate about, or where you're trying to really ultimately get in your life. But which one of these decisions really reflects who I am deep inside?
It takes it so much deeper than just a pros and cons list.
Yeah, it really does.
It's a value check.
It's a value check, and these are for the big decisions. And I think what's hard is some people really grapple over some of the smaller decisions too. Allocate your emotional gasoline. It's like everyone only has enough gasoline in a day to make decisions. Is this decision worth a full tank?
I love
that. I mean, honestly,
that.
and we're just making this up as we go along, but I'll really try to tell myself, why am I caring this much? What if at 4 o'clock today I have a legit decision I have to make, and I spent all of my emotional bandwidth on what to eat for lunch? Move on, and then when you've got a big decision, give that some thought. Seek, you know, collaboration and trusted advisors, and lay them out, and then decide what represents you most in life, and then move on.
You just touched on a buzzword too, trust. How can we trust ourselves more intimately?
Right. I think that trust comes with practice. Making a decision forces you to grow in areas that are often uncomfortable. And I don't think it's so much that people really struggle about a decision. It's that they're realistically thinking that decision all the way through and struggling with having to own the consequences of making that decision. Having to be a failure, having to disappoint someone. disappointing yourself, right? Looking imperfect or being judged unfairly. And I think it's all those consequences, and sometimes those are real and sometimes they're imagined, right? So I think that really learning to trust yourself and saying, I did the best job I could at the time, but who I was yesterday is not who I am today, and who I am next week is not who I am then. So you can always self-correct, right? Your core values when you were 20 are not your core values when you're 35, and they will not be your core values when you're at 50. So just understand, when you look back, go, you know what, I made the best decision I could at the time, and at the time I valued my freedom. It was worth racking up a little debt because I wanted those adventures. I was unencumbered. I wanted to travel. And that was what I did at the time.
At the time.
At the time. And I made that best decision, and then free yourself from having to rack yourself about
You
that.
have a motto that helps with that self-freedom, and it's go with good enough.
Oh my gosh, I say this all the time.
I love it. Go
Mostly
with good
to
enough.
my husband.
There it is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I promised her I wouldn't throw him under the bus, but habitually indecisive, right? About small things, and really always being conscious of those decision making. And I'm always like, hon, it's good enough.
Good enough.
It's good enough. You got to move on. I say it to my kids often because I think, again, you're striving for that perfection. That's a myth. You've got to wait until it's good enough and you feel really good. And again, there's urgency behind this. The longer you wait for that decision making, I think, and again, in the corporate world, people would rather see you make a mistake, own up to that mistake in real time, and then try to revise it and move on. And that garners, I think, more respect and loyalty than habitual indecision making, right?
The ownership.
People are perfectly fine if you make a mistake. If you own up to it, apologize, and then quickly try to move on, rather than struggle with making the decision in the first place.
Would you say indecisive people who struggle with decision making in general, are a little overly hard on themselves?
Yeah. Absolutely, and that's what I think it hurts them with making future decisions, is they've already gotten into a pattern of kind of, imprisonment and just poring over, was that a good decision, was it? And they don't look forward to that exercise. They don't look forward to that experience. They don't want to have to go through that. So I think, again, it's, if I make a mistake, what's the worst thing that can happen? I'm going to grow from it, and that's going to help inform better decisions, and that's going to help me get better at making these decisions so they're more fun, right? It can be really, what did I read the other day? That making a decision is a powerful act of confidence. And the better you get at it, the more confident you feel, and confidence feels good.
Yes, it does.
So that's why I think you and I get really good at making decisions. We've learned how to experience the high that decision making can have, and the freedom it gives everyone else around you to see a leader with some certainty. People cling to that because they're looking for guidance, right? So if you are someone who just helps make a decision, people will naturally flock to you when they have a decision to make, and then it feels really good to help someone in resolving that decision, and it feeds, and it becomes a really positive exercise rather than something that you always dread, like, oh, I have this decision, I'm just going to keep procrastinating it, and then it festers. Then it grows mold, and then it gets really ugly, and then you don't look forward to having to do it ever again. And guess what? You probably have another decision around the bend tomorrow.
Yes.
Just get used to it, right?
So many little gems in this conversation I learned. Thank you so much.
Yeah, me too. Thanks.
And we'll invite you to share as well. We want to know, what's a strategy or a motto that helps you to be more decisive? What's your trick to finding maybe a fast solution, or your approach to those big life choices? Let us know on Facebook. We're going to consider this sort of a woman helping woman opportunity. Just dial up the Studio 5 Facebook page, and you can chime in there.